In a kingdom wrapped in winter's shimmering glow, a baby girl was born, her skin as soft as freshly fallen snow, her lips as red as a blooming rose, and her hair as dark as a moonless midnight. The king, her father, named her Snow White, for she shone with a purity that could warm even the coldest of hearts. Years drifted by like snowflakes on a gentle breeze. And Snow White grew into a young princess whose kindness was a gift to everyone she met. But the queen, her stepmother, ruled the castle with a heart colder than the deepest winter ice. She watched Snow White's growing beauty with a bitter, creeping envy. Each morning, without fail, she would stand before her enchanted mirror and ask the same question. Mirror, mirror on the wall, who is the fairest of them all? For many years, the mirror's answer soothed her vanity, always replying, "You are my queen." But one fateful morning, the mirror's voice was different. It whispered a truth the queen could not bear. Snow White is the fairest of them all. The queen's face hardened, her beauty twisting into a mask of jealousy. She summoned a huntsman, her voice sharp and cold. "Take Snow White deep into the forest," she commanded, "and never let her return." The huntsman, though bound by loyalty, felt his heart ache. He could not bring himself to harm such an innocent and gentle soul. Deep in the woods, with trembling hands, he turned to the princess. "Run," he whispered, his voice thick with fear and regret. "Run far away and never ever look back." Snow White fled, her heart hammering against her ribs like a trapped bird in a storm. The forest grew dense and menacing around her. Towering trees cast long twisting shadows that seemed to reach for her. Strange glowing eyes glimmered from the darkness, and every rustle of leaves sounded like a pursuing footstep. Overwhelmed by terror and exhaustion, she finally sank to the forest floor, her face buried in her hands as tears streamed down her cheeks. But as she wept, the woods around her seemed to soften. The menacing shadows retreated, and a gentle warmth filled the air. Curious birds perched on branches nearby, tilting their heads. Small, furry creatures, rabbits, squirrels, and deer nudged her gently with their noses, guiding her along a hidden, winding path. Soon, the path led her to a clearing where a little cottage stood, tucked cozily beneath a hill covered in moss and leaves. She knocked softly on the tiny door, but there was no answer. Hesitantly, she pushed it open and stepped inside. A strange and wonderful sight met her eyes. Everything was small: the chairs, the plates, the bowls on the table, and even the 7 little beds lined up against the wall. It was as if the house belonged to children. Exhausted from her ordeal, Snow White couldn't resist the inviting softness of the beds. She curled up across them and, in moments, fell into a deep and dreamless sleep. When the sun dipped behind the mountains, casting long shadows across the land, 7 dwarfs returned home from a long day's work in the mines. As they approached their cottage, they noticed the door was ajar. "Someone's been sitting in my chair," one cried out in his gruff voice, "and someone's been eating from my bowl," said another, pointing a stubby finger. Then, as they peered into the bedroom, all seven shouted at once, "And someone's been sleeping in our beds." They tiptoed closer, their lanterns held high, and there they found Snow White, sleeping peacefully. Her beauty seemed to fill the little room with a soft, warm sunlight, chasing away the evening gloom. "She looks lost," murmured the dwarf with the kindest, gentlest voice. "So we help her," declared the one with the widest, most cheerful smile. When Snow White awoke, she was startled to see 7 pairs of curious eyes looking down at her, but their faces were filled with concern, not anger. She told them her whole story about the cruel queen, the dark forest, and the huntsman's unexpected mercy. The dwarfs listened with worried eyes and furrowed brows. When she finished, they spoke as one. "Stay with us," they said kindly. "You'll be safe here with us." And so, life in the little cottage settled into a joyful rhythm. Snow White kept the home bright, clean, and filled with laughter. In return, the dwarfs filled her days with warmth, comfort, and protection. They told her fascinating stories around the crackling fire, sang hearty songs on their way to the mines each morning, and watched over her as if she were their own beloved sister. For the first time in a long time, Snow White felt truly happy and safe. But far away in the castle, the queen's peace was short-lived. She stood once again before her magical mirror, her voice confident. "Mirror, mirror on the wall, who is now the fairest of them all?" The mirror's reply sent a shockwave of fury through her. "Snow White," it answered, "who lives with the 7 dwarfs, is still the fairest of them all." Rage burned through the queen like a poison. She would not be defied. Disguising herself as a frail old peddler woman, she journeyed deep into the forest, her heart set on a dark purpose. When she reached the cottage, she found Snow White alone, humming a cheerful tune as she swept the floor. "Pretty child," croaked the disguised queen, her voice raspy and old. She held out a shiny red apple, so perfect it seemed to glow. "Take a bite," she coaxed, "and let its sweetness fill your day." Snow White hesitated, remembering the dwarf's warnings about strangers. But the apple gleamed with such irresistible beauty, and the old woman seemed so harmless. She gently accepted the poisoned fruit. The moment her teeth broke the skin, a powerful spell took hold. Her hands slipped, the apple fell to the floor, and she collapsed as still and silent as winter frost. When the dwarfs returned home that evening, their cheerful songs died on their lips. They found Snow White lying on the floor, lifeless. Their hearts broke. They wept until the entire forest seemed to echo with their sorrow. They couldn't bear the thought of burying her beautiful form in the cold, dark earth. Instead, they built a coffin of pure, clear crystal so that her beauty and gentle spirit would never fade from sight. Seasons changed. Snow blanketed the forest floor, then melted away to reveal the first spring flowers. One morning, a prince was riding through the woods when he came upon the clearing. He saw the crystal coffin and the breathtaking girl who slept inside it. He dismounted, drawn by an overwhelming sense of compassion and wonder. She looks as though she's only dreaming, he whispered to himself, moved by a love so pure it was almost painful. He leaned down, lifted her hand, and kissed it gently. At his touch, a soft breath escaped Snow White's lips. Her eyelashes fluttered, and her eyes slowly opened, like flower petals in the morning light. Where am I?" she murmured, her voice soft and confused. "You're with friends who love you," the prince said, his own voice shining with overwhelming joy. The dwarfs, who had been watching from a distance, rushed forward, cheering and embracing her with happy, streaming tears. Word of her miraculous awakening spread like wildfire, reaching the farthest corners of the kingdom. Soon, Snow White returned to the castle not as a frightened girl, but as a beloved princess, ready to reclaim her home. The cruel queen, consumed by her own darkness, vanished into the shadows she had created, never to be seen again. Snow White married the handsome prince in a grand celebration filled with music, dancing and flowers as bright and vibrant as her smile. The seven dwarfs stood proudly beside her, their eyes twinkling with love and pride. The kingdom flourished under her gentle and kind rule, and from that day forward Snow White's story lived on in every heart, a timeless reminder that kindness is always stronger than envy, courage is always brighter than fear, and true love is more powerful than even the darkest magic. And so the kingdom finally found peace, and Snow White's life blossomed like spring after a long, cold winter, warm, hopeful, and forever full of light. Thank you for watching this enchanting tale with us. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more magical adventures. See you next time.